Okay, Portugal, it's rapidly establishing itself as one of Europe's leading, I guess, digital and AI ready hubs. Just your thoughts as to, how big is the boom, if you like.
Sure. Well, it's definitely one of the newer locations, and it's rising fast. It's really in response to the availability of significant power and growth in what are traditionally the tier one data center markets in Europe. Which we could summarize as sort of the London, the Paris, Frankfurt, Amsterdam's, these sorts of locations, Dublin, even arguably, big locations. And what's happened, with the power squeeze on these cities, on these big hubs, new locations have had to appear. One of the earlier new risers, let's call them, has been Scandinavia, which still attracts a lot of data centers because of climate, power availability, etc. But in the past few years, where we're based, the Iberian Peninsula has become this second alternative to the tier ones. So I say Iberia because it really is. If you look at it as a whole, Spain and Portugal attracting a lot of investment and big data center growth projects to this location.
Yeah, and Start campus and I think Copenhagen Economics carried out a study just as even sort of more further growth, or at least trying to quantify the growth for data center development in the country. And I think the figures is about 26 billion euros could be added to national GDP between now and 2030, which sounds quite exciting, shall we say?
Yeah, it's really it's being borne out. I mean, our campus alone is going to be an 8.5 billion euro investment. For the lifetime of the project. 1.2 gigawatts. Very much an AI focused campus in Sines, the port city, about an hour and a half south of Lisbon. But that's just our physical investment into the infrastructure. The 26 billion number ties in obviously other data center builds, but also if you think about it, the technology that then will come into these buildings, which is extremely high value chips and servers. And then the third layer really is the ecosystem effect, which is the tech and AI companies using the facilities then have knock-on effects to the wider digital economy, because you have companies that then appear similar to, if you think about manufacturing and cars. When the manufacturing factories come, you get in all these suppliers that come along with the main car build because the cars are getting built. Data center AI data centers arguably aren't too dissimilar. The building comes, and then when these larger AI companies put their data there, you have knock-on effect within the country itself as other tech companies and startups appear to support them.
Yeah, and I suppose not unrelated to that, I think the study looks at the number of jobs that the sector could support as a result of this expansion, and also sort of looks at the suitability of the Portuguese workforce to fill these roles in terms of what's available now and whether any education training programs. So just your thoughts as to the job opportunities and how skilled the workforce is, and if anything needs to be done to upskill folks, if you like.
Yeah, it's a very good question, I think, and it sort of ties a little bit to the start when we spoke about Portugal as a destination. And if we had to list some of the reasons or the main reasons why Portugal it was selected for our campus, is not just too dissimilar to why a Dublin or London has been selected in the past. Is a very educated and very English speaking workforce is very attractive for a tech development, an international tech development like ours. The other reasons, just to quickly summarize for the viewers, is the renewable power mix in Portugal is incredibly high, around 80% last year, and they want to push to 90 plus by 2030. So that's, hydro, solar, and getting 80% from the national grid is incredible for a data center operator like us. And then the networking and connectivity is phenomenal in Portugal as well. It's the only country that can connect you via subsea cables to every continent in the world, and that's just historically of its location on the sort of edge of Europe, connecting to Americas, Africa, etc. And then a third piece is the power costs are very attractive. So we're only a few cents, arguably, depends on the time of year, etc., but more expensive than Scandinavia. So it's very competitive on the power cost front as well. But then to your last question, it's the English speaking and educated population. However, as the tech makeup of the economy develops, we are working with academia to provide more courses, both around critical infrastructure, which is the sort of the engineering and the operational part of data centers. But there's also a lot around within Portugal around just the digital and AI education needed for the whole workforce. And Google as well has launched a lot of big projects within Lisbon and nationwide for that. So we see ourselves really as a support to the initiatives by the large tech companies.
Yeah, and in terms of the reasons for the expansion, I think it's already been mentioned, but is it entirely this AI explosion that you think will fuel the growth, or is it also the continuing growth of the digital world generally? Clearly, data centers are going to increase their capacity significantly to cater for digital consumption, but then AI sort of jumps in on top. What's the sort of likely balance between the AI and, shall we say, normal data center usage?
Yeah, good question. I would say, and having been in the industry, over a decade, the size and makeup is definitely changing because of AI. So let's call it the normal cloud, digital consumption, video streaming, all of the stuff that consumes data in these large facilities today, has generally been 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 megawatt buildings, maybe pushing to 50 in North America, large campuses. Our first building on campus, which we launched live end of last year, is about 31 megawatts, and we're calling it the Nest because the next ones are going to be about 180 megawatts each. So it just gives you a feel of that change, and that change really, it's very easy to summarize, is because of AI. The language models, the LLMs, when they're being trained, obviously use GPU processors, which are these graphical processors, and or the famous chip companies now being discussed around them, and they just generate more heat. So at a simple level, need more energy and generate more heat, and need much more power to train. And then also, when AI starts getting used en masse, which is called AI inference, so when you're not training the models, but general users like us start accessing the AI models, that's also going to need a lot of power. It's being seen more and more. So that's made a paradigm shift in the size of these facilities, both in Europe, but very much in North America and now Asia, where now you're talking about hundreds of megawatt size campuses, if not like ours, 1 gigawatt and above. And that's really this wave of growth of AI training and usage.
Yeah, and in terms, you mentioned already the main reasons, some of the main reasons why folks are attracted to Portugal in terms of the energy supply, the cables, the connectivity, but I think also sort of resource efficient cooling solutions. Yourselves, if I remember correctly, you're doing something innovative around seawater. But yeah, tell us a bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. So obviously power is rightly so what everybody associates with data centers, because they do, obviously these servers use a lot of power. The other thing that people don't necessarily always talk about is the water usage of these facilities, which is very high and getting higher with the AI facilities, because the servers need liquid cooling rather than air conditioned traditional cooling that the more generic, let's call them, servers and processors need. So when you have liquid cooling, you need more water, and the whole facility, when you're talking 1.2 gigawatts or above, that's a lot of heat that needs cooling for the facility. So when we're looking at locations for this campus, the reason, one of the primary reasons, apart from the others I mentioned earlier, for this location in Sines, Portugal, was because it's right on the coast and we're next to a decommissioned coal power plant. Now, the decommissioned coal power plant still has a lot of pipe infrastructure in the sea, which we will be and we are reusing as water intakes for the facility. And it's a very unique solution. Data centers, both tech companies and some operators have done this in the past using seawater, but at much smaller scales, sort of 5, 10, 15, 20 megawatts, maybe slightly more, but never at 1 gigawatt where you need a lot of water. So we needed big infrastructure for that, which we can use from the existing power plant pipes, and we're investing now in more pipe work, obviously, to the facility. And Sino One uses what we call early seawater, and then the whole facility, once we build the other larger buildings, will be fully seawater cooled. What that means is basically that, just for the listeners' benefits, it's not obviously that the seawater will actually go to the servers or the chips. It's like an open loop and then a closed loop system, and then imagine sort of a metal sheet in between the two water systems. So that the hot water, which is a closed loop liquid cooling for the servers, that water is passed the metal, and then the seawater, which is an open loop system, basically takes that heat, and then we pass it through a heat exchanger make it safe before putting it back out to the sea. And that just means you're not having to use fresh water or groundwater to do that process for the building. And obviously that's a massive topic at the moment, around actually digging into the ground and pulling up what is fresh water or drinking water to cool these facilities. So this has caught the attention of a lot of people around its transition from old energy to new energy, and then where this can be replicated in other places where there's these old facilities that have access to seawater. It's also being done with lakes. You see it in China and some places in Switzerland, actually, with supercomputers where they're using lake water. But this is given the Atlantic Ocean's cool temperatures as well, it allows us to work with that very safely and efficiently. So that is one of the unique parts. Is eventually the campus will be zero water usage effectiveness. It's a factor within the data center community called WE, which is how effective we're using water. We'll be aiming for zero because of the seawater system.
And I'm just wondering, does that seawater, or in the case of the lake where you went, does that have to be treated to a certain extent, or because it's, if you like, removed from the IT kit, it's not an issue, or do you have to desalinate it, for example, or how do you treat it, if at all?
Yeah, there's a little bit. As mentioned, none of that water gets to any of the chips or the server equipment. That's a separate water in the liquid cooling solutions that the customers use. So we help them with the main water of the building to cool the water they're using, if that makes sense, in the closed system. But no, there's minimal treatment. Whatever we take through, because we do store some of the water and it goes through pipework, there is some treatment needed on the water, but it's minimal. And then obviously based on Portuguese and EU regulations, and obviously the coal plant was doing similar with water going back out to the sea. That's all has to pass through a test and heat exchanger before we put it back out to the sea again.
Okay, and in terms of the opportunity for digital infrastructure and the accompanying data center growth in the Iberian Peninsula, it's obviously huge, but I think the survey identifies a number of sort of actions or areas where policymakers in particular can contribute towards this expansion. Just perhaps share what you think needs to happen to help the growth.
Yes, there's a few areas really, and Portugal's been obviously very good at this, just given the size of our investment and the size of the campus, and the infrastructure we're reusing and repurposing. But really, it's same for most countries now with this. When you talk about facilities this large, you need to work closely with the power companies. You need to work closely with the infrastructure departments, because you're talking about networking, connectivity. You need to work with inbound investment regulations, because you have international customers coming into the building with technologically advanced and expensive equipment. So there's issues around and working around import, all stuff we've been working very well in Portugal with. But it's always you need to do a bit more, and as more companies come, and it's really and you see the same with the EU and with the UK now around AI investment. It's such a hot topic that governments are looking at how can we be even more streamlined to what is really a bit of a global battle for AI infrastructure. That's what it's going to almost turn to. Which countries are going to house the primary large AI models, and which countries will just use them, if that makes sense. Because not every country, just because of power, will have multi-gigawatt facilities in them, and not all of them need it. It's which ones become the hubs, and that ties into the report around, we identified, regulation, infrastructure support, as I mentioned, sort of country investment guidelines, and support for companies coming in with their equipment and technology and basing their infrastructure within that country as an international company. We identified those areas, and also what we talked about earlier, supporting the workforce, educational support to academia, just raising that bar. So when companies look at locations like ours as an international tech company, they say, sure, we'll send our own engineers, but we will need to recruit locally as well. And that work pool is enough for what we need from a critical infrastructure, engineering, operations, these sort of staff. So it all ties in together as a sort of a national strategy for attracting investment.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting because I mean it might be slightly harsh, but I say the data center industry so far has developed. I won't say despite government, but governments have maybe not been that interactive in terms of encouraging. They've just data centers have been built, and maybe local government has got involved in plan decisions, etc. But do you think now we are entering this stage where national governments do have the power, as you've sort of suggested, to influence where data center builds, communities decide to locate, or because of the expansion, is it likely that it's going to happen in so many places it's maybe not an issue, or is there a real imperative for governments to start being proactive and driving this expansion if that's what they want to do?
Yeah, I think with there's been, so let's say that if you look at the data center history specifically in Europe, you see some locations sort of develop into data center hubs, as you say, not accidentally, but as a natural progression, like Ireland, for example, and Dublin, and then London, Paris, Frankfurt. These are the latter are financial hubs, and that's why they become data center. They became data center tier ones because the world's financial data, was passing through them. So data centers gravitated, and then the world's content also went through there because they're massive population centers as well, international population centers. Ireland was because of tech companies coming and basing their HQs there, and so their temperate climate was always very attractive. The regulations then developed to be attractive for international companies, and so data centers developed. So that's happened a little bit, as you say, by accident almost, with not a proactive look at data center progress. What's happened recently, you see it with the UK with the Prime Minister, you see it with the President of the EU and other countries. With AI, they're now being very proactive around not just how do we benefit from AI for our economy, but the others are now thinking, hang on, how can we become an infrastructure home for AI? And when they start having those discussions, they realize that really boils down to energy and infrastructure, and then regulations and being supportive. And so you see a lot of these discussions now happening where countries are now looking at, okay, so if London is too over saturated, can we develop other hubs in the north where we can access energy and build these infrastructure? France is doing the same, Germany. And then with us, in Portugal, it's a very unique large campus, again, south of Lisbon, in a port city. So yes, I think it's happened a little bit by accident today, or by development. Now with I would say AI and looking at data centers as which they are, where AI will live and grow, governments are saying, well, hang on. And you saw the same in North America in the last 6 months. There's been a massive push for data center development to fuel and house the growth of AI. and that's same pull investment into the country with these centres.
But I guess obviously governments can do so much, but as you suggested with Portugal, and I think you referenced Scandinavia as well earlier, there are some natural advantages of certain parts of the world, or like Portugal, you've developed, the renewable energy side much more than other places. So do you think there are some natural advantages for certain locations which others might struggle to replicate, bearing in mind a lot of the power infrastructure across Europe is sort of old and creaking and needs some kind of renewal, whereas in places like Portugal and Scandinavia, they perhaps don't have those challenges to the same extent. Just your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think that definitely, and exactly like you said, that's why Scandinavia has attracted such big investments because it's got energy benefits and geographic benefits. Same as you said, Portugal with the very uniquely high renewable energy mix and energy at the same time. Low energy costs are a very unique combination there, which makes it attractive. I think there will be other locations where even getting up to the power amounts we're discussing is going to be too tough for some countries, given their national grids. So I think there'll be some locations which will advance some countries, and then globally, I think every region is going to choose its hubs. Let's say, same in the Middle East. You're seeing Saudi and the Emirates building at pace, and those aren't traditionally temperate climates for data centers, but the investment and need is there geographically. And same in Asia, always a hard place to build data centers, but it's happening and planning at pace there as well because of this need. Just some locations are gonna make more sense than others, and then it's really going to be based then on how AI develops, how these models develop, and then how which is what all the reports are saying. The usage just keeps on going on this growth chart. Each country is going to have to look at how it facilitates that for its population without getting left behind in this economic boost that everybody's saying AI is giving to all sectors. It's changing economies, so countries are going to eventually say, right, as I said earlier, we're going to, within our constraints, how much can we welcome here, and then some of it we just have to accept are going to be in these hubs in Europe as a whole, or continents as a whole.
And maybe just to finish for yourselves, do you have any, clearly building a gigawatt factory and building that out is going to take you a reasonable amount of time and resource, but are you already sort of looking further down the line as to other places where what you're doing might make sense, or is it, as I say, just full on Portugal for now, and then as and when that's up and running to your sort of satisfaction, you'll start looking elsewhere?
Yeah, we definitely got our hands full. Let's put it that way. 1.2 gigawatts is a significant amount of power and infrastructure to build, and then welcome customers to. We anticipate, all being well, famous last words, early 2030s, we should have most of the campus developed in Sines. We are already looking at the locations. Nothing too specific yet. Another location, Portugal, maybe Europe and North America, but nothing too advanced. But what we want to do is, as a company and brand, is try and recreate as much as possible what we've done here. And that's not always going to be possible. We can't always build gigawatt plus. We can't always find seawater. But that sustainable AI infrastructure is where, at Start Campus, we want to play, which means larger deployments, so larger energy campuses, obviously. And it also means that either a very strong renewable national grid, which we can benefit from, or finding ourselves this unique technology or access to some sort of sustainable cooling, be it, or energy on the campus itself or near the campus. So that's what we'll focus on. But for now, it's very much completed the first building, get the next building going, focus on this campus, and in the meantime, if we find the growth opportunities, do that simultaneously.
Okay, it's been great to chat, and thank you for sharing the insights as to what's going on in Portugal and with yourselves at the Start campus. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Always a pleasure.